So I'm not afraid to try new things at all, as you can probably see by my resume. And in fact, after a while, once something becomes routine, I almost get bored with it and need to change it in some way to continue to feel like I'm learning. I would say from that perspective, I'd lean more toward the growth mindset. I mean, there's things I failed at and there's things I will continue to fail at. Like I see somebody do something and then I think, well, what if you did it this way? I wonder if that would be better. So then I want to go try it. Very much an experimenter in that respect and not afraid of digging in and figuring something out and not necessarily with a preparation for failure mindset either, but just like, what can we learn about this?
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today, Jeff is interviewing Amy Bradshaw. Amy recently joined Capital Bridge LLC and currently serves as the company's Chief Financial Officer. In her new role, Amy is responsible for scaling the organization's financial and accounting infrastructure to support the growth of the overall company. Prior to joining Capital Bridge, Amy worked with technology and service companies to evolve the accounting and finance functions. She has experience building strong teams and implementing new systems and processes to enable growth. Amy is a strong leader with a passion for developing her team members and for finding creative solutions to challenging situations. Amy graduated summa cum laude from Miami University with bachelor's degrees in manufacturing engineering and accounting. She also earned a Master of Business Administration from the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Amy.
Amy, welcome to the Corporate Couch.
Excited to be here. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, we had schedule changes, so I think this is our maybe third try to do this. So I'm excited to have you on. You've had a great career, and I think we met during the midway through the pandemic, maybe, I don't know, early in the pandemic, but you've become one of my favorite people that I've met during that time period. And congratulations, you're the first CFO on the podcast. So there you go.
Thank you.
Another career first for your great accomplishments. So let's start. I always like to ask a fun question. What's the worst attire or lack of attire you've ever seen on a professional Zoom call?
Oh, gosh. You know, I spent the majority of my pandemic days actually in the office and have not been that much of a Zoomer despite the world going that direction. So I don't have any like crazy Zoom experiences. Maybe I'm the only one in the world.
No, there's been a few. There's been some crazy ones, no pants. Somebody did an interview with no shirt on. Didn't get the job, obviously. Now remind me, were you with Di Pasquale and partners?
Di Pasquale more, yeah, during the pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah, we went home for like 90 days.
Okay.
And but we're the culture there, very in-person culture. And so like it's almost like we didn't adapt Zoom. We just started talking to each other on the phone. But even like Teams meetings and things we didn't do a ton of that. So then became the impetus to go back to the office because for at least the core group of people, we were only out of the office probably 90 days. And then it was like, okay, we got to get back to it. And so instead of adapting to virtual, we just went back to what we knew, which was in the office in person. And so, yeah, I escaped a lot of the Zoom era.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so for those non-Kansas City listeners, D. Pasquale and Moore is a law firm and very prominent attorney firm here, 20-ish, 25 attorneys, I think.
Probably more now, and they're
Yeah,
actually expanding regionally outside of Kansas City.
and everybody in Kansas City knows it as Better Call Mike.
Mike's got this.
Mike's got this. There you go. So.
Yep. There's a lot of commercial for him.
So, it's the podcast is the corporate couch. So not that we dive deep into your childhood, but when growing up, Amy, where'd you grow up and what did you like to do as a child?
So I grew up in a small suburb on the west side of Cleveland, Ohio, a very Rust Belt type area, very industrial. The community was had a lot of history in steel production and manufacturing of automobiles. My dad is a 35-year veteran of Ford Motor Company, and my mom was a nurse. Very good Catholic families, and I have one sister, lived in the same house my whole childhood, very stable. Very hardworking parents. Both of my parents extremely hardworking, and you could not escape that work ethic as a kid. It was just ingrained in who I became. And let's see. I mean, I did the normal kid things, music and brownies and sports, but I've been a nerd since day one. Very driven academically, and like the sick feeling when you got a B that's kind of ruled my childhood. But very loving family and good friends, small town, not a lot of trouble you could get into. At least I didn't find it.
That's for another podcast possibly, but
yeah.
What made you gravitate to school so much?
I don't know. it was how I measured myself, right? Was the grade card and doing well. And that, I mean, I was always incented by my parents to do well, but never not pushed, like some kids I think are pushed pretty hard by their families. It came easily to me. And then when I did well, I just wanted to keep doing well. So I would, bring my backpack of 10 books home, and I would sit at the table and do my homework. And I was the youngest, and my sister is 6 years older than I am. So she graduated and was out of the house, and my mom worked full time and my dad worked full time. So I spent some time, my afternoons to myself watching General Hospital, doing my homework in front of the TV.
There you go.
Before my mom got home. Yep.
Are you familiar with the book? I think it's Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck of Stanford.
I've seen it. I don't think I've read it.
Well, it has an interesting premise, but I did well in school also. And the premise of this book is if you do well in school, and usually that's certain subjects, or it could be all subjects, but sometimes it's just a few. But basically the book's premise is a fixed mindset is you do well in certain things, and you're praised for that for the most part. But that doesn't allow you to explore other things because you're not going to be good at them at first. So
Sure.
You hold back, and you don't have a growth mindset. Like a growth mindset is, I want to try so many things. I know I'm going to fail, and that's okay because that's the only way to grow.
Yeah.
Categorically, where were you in those two dimensions?
So I'm not afraid to try new things at all, as you can probably see by my resume. And in fact, after a while, once something becomes routine, I almost get bored with it and need to change it in some way to continue to feel like I'm learning. So I would say from that perspective, I'd lean more toward the growth mindset, just because there's things I failed at and there's things I will continue to fail at. But that learning and that I see somebody do something and then I think, well, what if you did it this way? I wonder if that would be better. So then I want to go try it. Very much an experimenter in that respect, and not afraid of digging in and figuring something out, and not necessarily with a preparation for failure mindset either, but just like, what can we learn about this? Like,
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
it's fun.
Yeah. So, as a child, did you have any aspirations like I'm gonna be this when I'm an adult? What was this if you had something?
When I was younger, I really wanted to have a store because I wanted a cash register.
Oh.
I don't know if that's my first pull toward like being in business, but like that concept of having a place where people could come and you provide a service, and then like that, the community aspect of it too, not just the transactional nature of it. But yeah, and then as I got older, I don't there was never like I want to be an accountant, or it was kind of like exploration of what do I think I could be good at. And to this day, one of the things that astounds me professionally is how our society is asks 17-year-old kids to make this gigantic investment decision about college and career with absolutely no preparation or understanding of like what that means to them financially, professionally, career wise. That it's a huge decision to make. And then, you kind of make it and pray that at the end of 4 years, you end up with this good job that you like, and that leads to an economically viable career in front of you. So it's been something I've revisited several times in my own life of like, how did I get here?
Oh no, I couldn't agree with you more. As you know, I taught this past semester at the University of Kansas, and I tell the students, because even at 22, they're going to pick up a job. I said, look, you're going to change careers most likely. Don't worry about your first job. It's the one you're supposed to have. Now you can do things to help your chances and get more things you want to do, but there's no wrong decision. I tell, even if you at that job for 3 months, it's not that learning you needed that learning in your life. So,
Yeah.
so then you graduate high school, and being the overachiever you are, you actually picked two majors. It looked like you graduated with an accounting degree from Miami University, and then also a manufacturing engineering. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's been 5 people that graduated from that university with that dual major. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was common, but tell us about that choice.
Yeah. So I basically couldn't decide what I wanted to do. My dad, more of an engineering background, and it just interested me a lot growing up, design. And it's funny, I'm kind of two people in one, because I'm your typical accountant in some ways, but then I have a very creative side as well. And that think that engineering program kind of fed that ability to be creative and to design and make and think about creating things. When I decided I was going to double major, but then I also wanted to graduate in 4 years, and every semester would have to approach the dean of the school to sign my permission slip to take more than 22 hours of credits in a semester. And he would look at me and say, Amy, what are you doing? And I would say, I'm trying to get out of here in one piece. It was a big investment in time and energy, and summer schools in between. But I couldn't choose, and I didn't want to choose. And it was fun. I had like my accounting study group, and then I had my engineering study group. And it also gave me a chance to kind of, meet more people and have a more variety of experience. I think, the opposite of what a lot of college kids do. I studied really hard for 3 years, got my job in the fall of my senior year, and then I kind of took my last semester like easy, and I actually took microbiology 101 my last semester because it was a requirement for a liberal arts degree, and I took it pass fail, and I had to go check my grade at the end to make sure I passed, because I may have gone to 3 classes, and I was like, oh my god, if I don't pass. And my mom I have to tell my mom I didn't pass college because I failed microbiology 101.
Oh my God. Now,
uh,
Amy,
but
most
yeah,
people in that situation, if they needed a class, they would take like film or golf, beginning golf or
I do have a
something.
science credit.
Oh, okay. Because I'm saying microbiology, really?
Yeah, it was horrible. I am not a biology person. So I was like, I put it off and put it off, put it off, and finally I couldn't put it off anymore. But yeah, yeah. So it was fun. I mean, it was a lot of hard work, but looking back on it is just such a good experience and a lot of fun. And then I decided I really didn't want to do either accounting or engineering when I graduated, and I took a job doing something completely different.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. But one more thing about so we're you're going to school in the 90s here, and were they still kind of more male dominant majors, accounting and manufacturing engineering?
The engineering school was for sure.
Mhm.
It was probably 75% guys to 25% girls. I'd say my accounting classes were more evenly distributed
Yeah. Okay.
at that point. And most of my study group on the accounting side was probably girls at the time.
So you go to one of the top four consulting companies in the world, PwC. How did you secure that job, and what was your first job?
Yep. So on campus interviewing, I had my pick really of interviews because I had really good grades and I had, good majors. And so pretty much that was the good result of all the hard work that I had put in up to that point. And so my senior year fall just started interviewing on campus. And I don't know, I had a handful of job offers, a variety of different positions, some, audit on the audit side for accounting firms, a couple engineering jobs, like there's quite a bit of manufacturing engineering opportunities in that part of the country, that Cincinnati, Dayton, like um, upper Kentucky area. There's quite a few things out there. I will tell you, I went on a tour for one job and I walked into a manufacturing plant in northern Kentucky and I was like 21-year-old girl and I felt like a piece of meat. And I mean, just walking through a factory and like just the eyes and this, like, I felt like, I don't know that I can do this.
Yeah, you're all
Even though I
dressed
know
up.
I can
Yeah,
do it.
yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like I was like, I don't know that I can see myself coming here every day. And so I was kind of shied away from that. I know all those places aren't like that, but at that time for me, I was like, I don't know that I can. So I ended up taking a job with Price Waterhouse, actually in their consulting practice. And I went my first 3 months, they sent us to school in Tampa, Florida, and I learned to code COBOL.
Wow.
So I became a programmer straight
Wow.
out of school. And that was like paid college because they paid you to live in a corporate apartment and have a car and go to school all day. And then we worked hard and then we went out and partied all night like we were still college students.
Oh
And
wow.
it was fun because their program brought all of the people from their start classes from all across the country to one place. So even though my little group from Cleveland was probably 5 or 6 people, we met up with people all over the country from San Francisco and Denver and Chicago and DC. And our start class, I want to say, was 30 to 40 people. And it was such a tremendous experience because during those days, you flew Monday through Friday to your client site and you worked. There was none of this Monday to Thursday, like you were first thing Monday morning to late Friday. And they would also pay for you to go if you didn't want to go home, but you wanted to go somewhere else. They would pay for your cost of your ticket unless it was more. So that group, once we graduated from the little training class and we started working, like one weekend a month, we would meet in a different city in the US and we would just go hang out somewhere and have fun and never go home essentially except to do your laundry.
I love it. So, do you keep in contact with any of your start class years later?
A couple people.
Yeah.
One of the guys in my start class actually was when a friend of mine from Miami, and he grew up not far from me in Cleveland. And I haven't talked to him in a while, but yeah, we kind of followed each other for a bit there. It's actually one of the guys in my start class was, I think, the chief product officer for DocuSign when they went public. Some other people that, friends on Facebook or whatever, and have lived all across the world. And it was a really good group of people, and still consider some of them friends for sure.
So did you leave PwC completely to go pursue your MBA at that point,
I
about 2 years?
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had to, when I went to Darden, you had to go full time. They wouldn't let you work while you were in school. So I did the Monday through Friday travel thing for probably about 18 months before I was like, man, I don't know if I can do this for the rest of my life. I mean, that's the career you're signing up for when you stay on in that type of role, especially at that time. And I had been on my first project was probably 6 to 9 months. And then my second project was a year or more. And it had pros and cons, right? Because, you're somewhere for a year and you feel like, you kind of get to be part of the client at that point. And then okay, well, we're done here. You move on. So you go to somewhere else. But they were definitely longer term projects. And then I just decided one day, I was like, I don't know that I see myself doing this forever. And kind of on a whim, I applied to business school, and I took the GMAT, and I did pretty well. And I applied very late in the year to like 3 schools. And I ended up actually getting waitlisted to Darden. And I think I didn't find out until late June or early July that I got accepted. And I never forget going home and telling my parents I got in, and my dad's like, "You're going. Like, there's no choice, you're going." Our family was very blue collar, and my dad put himself through college after he was already working full time. My mom did the same thing. She had gone to nursing school and then went back and got her bachelor's degree while she was still working full time. And so this concept of, graduate school and was like, you have to do it. And so I was okay. So I probably quit my job with very little notice because I had to go find a place to live and get ready to move. But yeah, that was a life-changing decision that I made kind of on a whim, that I think worked out well for me.
And what made it life changing?
I will say Darden was an extremely humbling experience for me. Going into that, I had never been in such a diverse, just intelligent, experienced group of people from around the world. And looking back on it, I wish I had waited longer to go back to school. I was one of the youngest people in my class. And I think just the shock of like, I don't even know if I'm average here. Like, I'd always been smart, and kind of on like the outer edge of achievers. And then I come into this group and I'm like struggling to be middle of the pack in some ways. And that was intimidating. And I had a guy in my class who was like probably in his 50s, had been a Washington Post reporter, had covered wars, and like seen things that I hadn't even dreamed existed yet. We had a Navy SEAL that had probably done who knows what in strange places in the world, and here I am, this girl from this tiny town in Ohio who thinks she's, got something. And I mean, it was a great experience. I met tons of people from around the world and learned so much in so many ways. But I came out of there, I think, a little dinged up with confidence, from a confidence perspective, and took a little bit to kind of get my feet up under me again after that. But came out with a good job, doubled my income, day one from where I had left my last job to my starting salary of my new job. And so, there's pros and cons.
No, it's interesting. And the number one question I get from either my students this past semester, or I do a guest lecturing for some friends of mine. But the number one question, and it's 100% of the time, should I get my MBA? And I would love to hear your opinion on it. I mean, obviously Darden is, a Princeton, a Harvard, a Stanford, in that category of, best MBA schools in the country and the world. But what's your take on that question from a college student?
I think it depends on what you want to do. I learned so much about so many different aspects of the business world. And Darden, you didn't focus. They had a general business curriculum. So like your first year, everybody took all of the same classes, no matter what. Your second year, you could choose electives that were more, in line with kind of what you wanted to do, but you could also take whatever you wanted. It wasn't like a marketing thing and all you did was take marketing classes. So it forced you to be well-rounded. And that I think has been invaluable to me. Even now in my career, I can sometimes think back to situations or case studies we did or things that I hadn't ever had to think about before, but now I'm encountering a situation where it's like, okay, let's think about this. I've seen this somewhere. And that just exposure and opening your mind to different things and learning how different perspectives that you can take, I think is a great experience and can be worth it depending on how you intend to apply that. I don't know that it's for everyone, but I also think that in the world today, everything leads back to money somehow. Right. And business in some perspective. And so the more you can bring to that, more experience you have to apply that, I think you're better off.
So you graduate Darden and double your income. Was that Arthur Andersen, now Accenture? Was that the position?
So I took a job out of Darden with a guy who was a partner at Arthur Andersen in Atlanta and was trying to start almost like an investment banking group within Arthur Andersen. And so I moved to Atlanta and to age myself. So I graduated Darden in the year 2000, like right when the internet bubble burst. And that was not the time to be trying to start an investment bank. It was very challenging. So we spent probably almost a year, working at it. I got my Series 7, my Series 63, and we did a lot of kind of foundational work, but it never really kind of got us anywhere. And so we were just kind of chugging along. And then for personal reasons, I decided to move back to Virginia. And so I was probably there maybe a year. And it was a good learning experience. It's kind of like you talked about, like you take your job and you just learn from it and you take the pieces that are helpful to you. And part of what you decide when you have experiences like that, I think, is what you don't want to do anymore. And you steer away from those things. Sometimes those are the most valuable lessons you can learn, I think, from jobs. It was a good experience. I don't know, just it was unfortunate the economic environment of the time kind of prohibited that from becoming what I think it could have been ultimately. And then obviously all the trouble that Anderson ended up in over the Enron thing kind of later made that even more unlikely to continue. But yeah, so moved then up to Virginia and took a job at actually a government contracting firm there, worked for the CFO, kind of a financial analyst role. And it was really interesting because I was, again, they kind of put me in this job and like figure it out and just kind of a right hand to the CFO and got to see a bunch of different reporting. They were doing some M&A, some treasury work, and just exposure to what it means to be in the finance function.
Yeah. So it looks like just based on your career journey, you really had a breakthrough professionally outside your obviously getting an MBA from Darden, but it looked like Cerner was kind of a big kind of where you really stepped up and did some great things. Why don't you kind of run through your career there and what you learned and what you did?
Yeah, I would agree with that. So we moved to Kansas City and I had one interview at Cerner and got the job offer and didn't know anybody else here. And so I was like,
Wait,
okay,
one person interviewed you?
well, I had one round of interviews, I'll say.
Okay,
I think
one
I
round.
interviewed with
Okay.
4 people at the same time, like at the same session,
Okay.
and got the job. And it was a finance role. They called it kind of a divisional controller. So you had a segment of the business that you were basically in charge of understanding from a finance standpoint. And I took that role. The guy I took over for was still staying with the company, but he was moving on to a different role. So he trained me. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. Like, this is a big job. And so for those people that are familiar with Cerner, is a software company, healthcare software company. And within Cerner, like Cerner developed all its own basically packages to support a hospital, each of the departments within a hospital. Well, when we did that, especially back when I was there pre the cloud, you had to sell a bunch of hardware and other software to enable your Cerner system to work. And so that was the group within Cerner that I supported from a finance perspective. So a lot of things going on with outside vendors and partners that most everybody else didn't have to worry about internally. So my job was a little bit different, had a different spin than most of my counterparts. And it was a very dynamic group that I supported. And so I learned for the first year and a half, just foundationally from the bottoms up, how this business operated. I had, typical accounting responsibilities, but also forecasting responsibilities. And so I had to work very closely with the business unit leadership to understand what they're, where are we going to be from a P&L at the end of the quarter. And I got to live through the day when I went in to prepare for close week, and I saw my boss and he said, I need your numbers by like Monday night, because we were going to miss for the quarter and they had to know like how bad it was going to be. And so we did pretty much like a week's worth of work in 36 hours to come up with a plan. And then the day that we pre-announced that we weren't going to hit our earnings, I think the stock dropped 67% that day. And it was like the 5th floor of the building where accounting sat was, it was like somebody had died. It was like, you just worked so hard only to miss, and that horrible feeling. But it was good experience to live through what that feels like. And so I stuck with that role for probably about a year and a half. And then I got to the point where, again, it was kind of like, okay, I got to get this, what else is out there? And the vice president that I supported was like, well, why don't you come over and run one of the groups on our side? And so I moved from being a finance person to being more of a, we called a practice manager. So I inherited a team of about 25 people, and I'd never managed that many people before. They were kind of an eclectic group, a group of very administrative type people. And then this kind of a group of maybe more dynamic, like, kind of moldable people. And for the next 3.5 years, we grew revenue and gross margin quarter over quarter for 13 straight quarters. And I took probably 25 people down to 13 at the end of the day. And we implemented systems and processes, and we totally revolutionized kind of that little book of business that pretty much up to that point had been a flat line. And to be thrown into a leadership position like that with really not a lot of experience was probably, looking back, one of my favorite success stories. This 28-year-old girl who didn't really know what she was doing, and my mantra at the time was, there's got to be a better way, because everything that we did was like, why do we do it that way? And who thought of that? And it was, nobody cared enough to make it different. And we made it all different. And I am still to this day friends with several of the people that were on that team. And it's like one of those shared experiences that you have. And it's just kind of fun for a little while. And so I did that for like 3.5 years. and kind of got to the end of that, and I ended up in a business development role when my last couple, I think 6-ish months at Cerner, which was a whole different ball game. But again, like kind of the story of my career is I'll give it a whirl. I'll see what I can do.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll try that.
So when you got thrown into this job with the 25 people on your team, that wasn't your first kind of leadership role where you actually had people reporting to you from a HR org chart perspective, or was it?
No, but for that many people it
Yeah.
was. Yeah. I mean,
And
I'd managed like a handful of people, but not 25 people that were, I would say, not all interested in really what they were doing.
I've had those people before. Uh,
Yeah.
so what did you lean on, Amy? Then, like, you're thrown in this position. So you've had direct reports, but not this many, and you're also doing something outside your kind of core accounting, finance, expertise. So, what were some of the things or people you leaned on at that time to learn to get better?
There were a handful of people on the team who'd been there a little while who you knew what they were talking about. They were reliable and they had good ideas. And partly you just had to ask, like what if you sat down with somebody and like, well, why do you do what you do? Well, I don't know. There's a story about these, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but they did a study at one time where they took 5 gorillas and they put them in a room with a ladder and they put bananas at the top of the ladder. Have you ever heard this? And these gorillas would, all try to go up the ladder to get the bananas, and they would spray this water on them that hurt until they would get off the ladder. And so the gorillas all became trained not to go up the ladder to get the bananas. And then one by one, they would take one of the old gorillas out, put a new one in, and the new gorilla would try to go up the ladder, and then all the gorillas would pull them down because they didn't want to all get sprayed with water because of negative reinforcement. So one by one, they take these old gorillas out and put the new ones in. And so at the end of the day, you're left with 5 new gorillas, none of which will go up the ladder, but none of whom know why either. They just won't do it. And so like that mantra is everywhere in the corporate world, so many places. Like, well, why do you do what you do? I don't know. They told me this is how I'm supposed to do it. Okay, well, does that still make sense to you? Like, is there something about that you can't explain why you do it? And so many times, like, people want to do what they're told, but they also sometimes do that even though they know it's probably not the best thing to do. And so if you come in and you empower them and say, well, I want to hear what you think, and well, what if we did it this way, and how do we learn whether we should still do it that way, or and kind of empowering people to use their voice and to use, I don't it's one thing to have a job and just come punch a clock, right? But I want people to thrive and to feel involved and included. And this was kind of my first foray into really understanding, like, how do you create a team, not just people that work together, but a true team that's invested in an outcome that might mean working late or on weekends or whatever, but because they want to, not because I've told you you had to. And probably that experience has fueled the rest of my career in terms of I love being a manager now. Like, I work so hard at being the person that people want to work for, not the person people have to. And that was the first time that I felt that like you can get a group of people to do something amazing if you do it the right way. So I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of just went off
No,
there.
I mean, no, it's great. I mean, I'm a big believer that people want to be part of something bigger than themselves at work. So, I think that's the job of the leader to create that type of environment. So I love it. But I'm still interested in, like, was there mentors that gave you leadership advice? I mean, I had heard that story before. You told me over coffee once about the gorilla thing. So you did tell me that one, as well as, was there books you read on it? The kind of, or it was just innate in you?
I think a lot of it was trial and error. to be honest. I mean, I've always been a reader, and so I read a lot of books, always trying to, find the new thing. I don't know that I intentionally during that time did that. Probably a lot of try it and see what works and what doesn't work and go from there. And I don't remember having, yeah, obviously like my boss and people within the organization that would ask for help occasionally, but nobody was really like giving me play by play. It was kind of make it up as we went along. And I think early on I was able to have a group, kind of a smaller group of people that were maybe like my direct reports who kind of caught on and glommed on to like, okay, let's see how we can do this. And that group stayed with me that whole time. And some of them stayed, even beyond when I left that team. And it wasn't the most exciting team to be on in the company. It was kind of one of these like, stepchildren, if you will. So, but a lot of people from that team grew up in the organization into, managerial and higher positions. So that was a basis for, we kind of just had this small group that just figured it out as we went. I don't know. I can't really point to anything else that kind of got me through it. Ingenuity.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. I'm curious about, I got my MBA at University of Missouri at Kansas City, and I did it at night, so much different experience than Darden. But I'm curious, did Darden, I mean, outside of the core courses that you usually go through an MBA, did they have any leadership type courses there, or or you just learned by the seat of your pants in terms of getting thrown into group projects and the group dynamics, team dynamics from that perspective?
Yeah, they did have some leadership courses. They had entrepreneurship courses too. Some of the more like kind of less textbooky, like finance type things. They had some more, I would say, creative type courses. I think I took a few of those. I don't know. I do feel like at the time, like thinking back now, I don't know how I knew what to do. I kind of went by gut, to be honest, quite a bit of it, I think. It's interesting because in some ways I'm a pretty conservative person. And then in other ways, I'm like, screw it. How bad can it be? Like, let's just see if it works.
Right.
And yep. I've maybe been lucky in that sometimes when it mattered, we did okay and came out in a better place. It was interesting. I mean, it wasn't all like fun because we probably let go half the team over the course of 6 to 9 months, just because the people weren't the right people for, like, they were good for how the job had been, but we were, implementing a lot more system type stuff. And it wasn't just clerical anymore. You had to be critical thinker and you had to do things, and just not everybody we had fit that profile. And so, managing people out probably got to the point where people were afraid to come to work on Friday because we kept letting people go on Friday. And so we would walk in and be like, who's it going to be today? Like, okay, maybe we need to pick a different day of the week to let somebody go. So it was like, that was hard. I had never fired anybody before or said they weren't meeting their expectations, and to do it time and time and time again. But it was necessary to get to what the job that needed to be done. You had to be able to do it. You like to tell yourself those people found roles that were better for them after they were gone. And I do hope
I think most time they do, though. They really do, because they're not happy doing the role, right?
Yeah, that's hard. So that was that was a growth experience too, in a less positive way, but having to live through all of that and see what an impact that you are to people and their livelihood, and how do you make sure you hire the right person the first time. That is something that, the cost of turnover in an organization, I wish as a P&L, like as a person who produces P&Ls, that there was a line that said turnover or cost of bad hiring, because
Yeah.
it's hidden everywhere, and it's easy to explain away when you can't see it. But when you really go to think about, especially companies with high turnover, the impact that that can have, it can be significant. So yeah, I learned some of the pitfalls too during that time period.
And then did you make a conscious choice to take a business development role after that at Cerner? I mean, that's a kind of another kind of, hey, I'm bored, maybe I've done what I need to do, and now I'm going to take a biz dev role.
Yeah. So it was kind of situational actually at the time. I had said, might be interested in trying something different. And at the time, Cerner had tried to develop for years its own like financial package that never kind of got off the ground. And we had a strong partnership with Oracle, which is funny now that you think about it. But every Cerner platform was run on an Oracle database. So all Cerner clients were Oracle customers. Well, we took that partnership and decided we were going to try to sell Oracle's, at the time, EBS financial solution to Cerner clients instead of trying to develop an in-house financial package. And so one of my colleagues went and sold Oracle EBS to a client who was implementing Cerner. And they looked at me and they said, well, Amy, you know how finances work. Like, why don't you take this project on? And so I had a customer with a signed contract, and that's pretty much all I had. And they put me in charge of trying to figure this out. And I had a guy I was partnered up with who I had never met before, who's also a Cerner guy. And he and I spent the next, I don't know how many months, flying all around the country, trying to work with an implementation partner at a client who was still implementing their Cerner system to implement a financial solution that really wasn't like, we didn't know how to sell what we were selling. We just sold it. The first of a kind is always a guess by everyone. And it just was, it was challenging in that the expectation was to go get it successfully launched at this client and then they gave me a quota, right, to go sell it some more. And the first time you talk to anybody, they say, well, who's doing it today? And you say, well, we're in the middle of an implementation, like, call us back when it's done. Right? You don't have a reference. You don't know if it works. And the project was going sideways that we had pretty hard. And I don't know if it ever ended up being successful, to be honest. We tried so hard and we made progress, but even in the six to 8 months or whatever I was in that position, it never was implemented while I was there. So it was challenging circumstance. And that's kind of like, that's how innovative Cerner was, right? Like, you just tried it, and sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. And, but a lot of times those bets paid off and became, very profitable partnerships across, the business.
Yeah. So I think about that time, did you leave Cerner?
I did. Yep. That was my last position. That was at Cerner, was that position. And because I had been new to Kansas City before I took that role, I decided to go with a consulting firm because I decided that maybe I would get the chance to see more companies in the city and get to know, maybe I would find the place where I needed to go, by way of, taking a more project-ish approach to interviewing companies, as opposed to, just trying to land my next kind of job at a company. And ironically, I ended up staffed at the same client for almost my entire tenure of 3+ years at when I was at Marcus Fear. So that kind of backfired, but it paid off later.
You've been a CFO for I don't know how many years, but at least for 3 or 4, maybe 5 companies. Was that your defined career path?
I don't know that I've ever had a defined career path. I'm just kind of like, take the next step that's in front of me, that feels like the right thing at the time. I will say, when I achieved the role of CFO, I did feel like I got somewhere. Like, it felt like a big accomplishment. And I felt like I made my parents proud. I don't know, maybe that sounds silly, but that, they've invested so much in supporting me and helping me get to where I am. And I felt like that was something that, not paying them back necessarily, but to show that I valued what they had invested in me and that had worked hard to get to a significant place in my career. And that was meaningful.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean that's to be a C-suite member, chief financial officer is incredible. So one of your stops was at Torch AI. So in the cybersecurity, artificial intelligence space. So obviously AI is, it's in. I don't know if we Googled AI, how many billions of postings would come up. But what was that like being in the AI space in the last couple of years?
I mean, it's such a fluid space, and there's so much activity right now in AI. And I think I didn't really know what it meant when I went there. I just was like, oh, this is a great sector to be in and an opportunity to learn. It's like every place else. And AI is based on something, right? Like something doesn't go from not knowing anything to knowing everything. You have to train it, and you have to have basically basically teach it before it can then extrapolate from there. And understanding how that process worked, at least from the money girl, I like from my way of thinking about it, the product people would probably keel over from things that I'm saying. But in my simple finance mind, like, you still have to have enough, call it, of a data set to train the model to then go do what you want it to do. And that is almost like an asset. And, I was thinking about it financially and thinking, like, almost like, should that be on my balance sheet as this thing that I now have, this model that I can go take to then say it's insurance policies that we're doing work with. I can now take that model and go to another insurance company, and I now only have to invest so much incrementally to adapt the model to be applicable to them, and so on. It does, and it becomes even more valuable the more it learns, right? And so how to think about that from a project standpoint, but also a financial standpoint, and thinking about the implications to potentially, like, how my balance sheet might look, and understanding how we must adapt what we do because of these models and business models out there.
So you're the CFO at Capital Bridge. That's a fairly new position for you, a new company for you. You sit on several boards, volunteer boards. You are raising children and doing all that. And then, since I know you're working on, I'm going to call it a connector app. So what was the basis of, you just wanted to, again, have a double major, accounting and manufacturing engineer, tell us about the app and what you're trying to do with that.
Yeah, I'd love to. So it all spurred from probably 8 years ago. I woke up one day and I realized that while I had been in Kansas City for quite some time, at that time, probably almost 15 years, that I didn't really know a lot of people outside of the people I had worked with. I'm not from here. I'd moved here as an adult, and I just had worked really hard and invested most of my time either at work professionally or, then getting married, having children. And I realized I needed to meet more people in a more networking type situation. And so I reached out to a good friend of mine who is one of the most connected people that I know. And I like, would you introduce me to somebody? And she did. She introduced me to an attorney who's a good friend of hers. And then she introduced me to some people. And I just started this networking journey. And at first, I would say I was probably quantity over quality, in that, when you dip your foot in that pool and you're not used to swimming in it, it can be very overwhelming. I mean, the thing about Kansas City that has always impressed me is how every person I met during that time period was open to meeting, and they would also ask me, what can I do to help you? And they would follow through, and they meant it. And even though they didn't know me, right? And that was my first foray into, like, what it meant to network and to really have this group of people that, knows you to certain degrees, but is there to be a resource if necessary. And so I have this notebook I used to carry, and I would tape the business card in there, and then I would write notes about the person and where we met and what we talked about. And this notebook would get harder and harder to close because I had so many cards in there. Scott Havens used to tease me about my notebook. And so I just came to the point where I was like, I have all of this information, but if I didn't have my notebook, I would write on a random sheet of paper, right? Like take notes, and then I would lose it or I wouldn't be able to find it. And I just like, I wanted a place where I could keep all of this information. And, when people tell you things about themselves, it's not stuff, when you're talking to them one-on-one, it's not stuff that's on their LinkedIn page. It's not stuff that, they're going to just publicize in general to the world. It's stuff that they're telling you. And that stuff meant something to me. And so I started down the journey of creating an app to basically be what I call a personal relationship management platform. So it's CRM-ish, but without the sales focus. And it's really intent to bring people closer together and to help just really nurture relationships between the people that, I've met and want to keep in touch with, because, it's if they ever need to find me or I need to find them, and I can be of use to them, but people that matter in my life. It's not social media based. It's very much like my diary, for the people that I know, and want to make sure that I can be a good steward of that information and of that relationship, really.
Now, and is your goal with the app to make it generally available to people
Yep.
so they can use it also?
Yeah, so today there's a website, and we are in the midst of developing our actually native app right now. So hopefully, I don't know the timeline yet, but it's coming along nicely. And I'm excited because the group I'm working with has done a great job taking my initial vision and simplifying it and making it, I think, very user friendly. So I'm excited.
Yeah, love it. I can't wait till it comes out. I did do some testing on the app version. So, yeah, well, Amy, I'd love to help two groups of people. So I'd love your advice. The first group, and we kind of touched on it earlier, but recent college graduates, we're talking here in June of 2023. A lot of people graduated last month in May. What advice do you have for them as they pursue their first professional job?
Good question. Try to find what you love doing. Like when you have jobs that feel like jobs, they don't last long because you can learn from them, but you're not yourself necessarily when you do them. And I think the more, people say find your passion, and I struggle with that phrase because, like, I don't know that I have found a passion necessarily, but I found a place where I fit and I'm good and I feel like I add value. And it took me a while to get there. And so I think the other thing I would say is find a manager that will help you be a better person. And I think most of my jobs my success or failure in a role has been driven by who I work for. And that relationship, especially earlier in your career when you are so beholden to that person to help you, that relationship, I think, is one that when you find a good manager, it can make a total difference in not just your current role, but your opportunities, outside of that role within the organization, and not just having somebody that wants you to do all the work and then take credit for it. Been in those roles too. And so it's hard to know going in, but, trust your gut, I think, is another one. Like, and sometimes too, I'll never forget walking down the street with my dad, my first job, being frustrated that I hadn't gotten promoted yet, and him saying, you have to pay your dues. And I did not want to hear that. And I was like, but I have. And he's, no, you haven't. like I think especially to the younger generations, like instant gratification, and that, like even I remember my dad being like, you just put your head down, keep doing a good job, and you'll get to where you need to be. And it's hard knowing like when you've done that long enough, and when you're just not in the right place. So I don't know that you ever get old enough to figure that out.
Right. The second group I love to help is, and again, we touched a little bit on this also, but your early career, you're usually individual contributor, but now you get promoted, you are a manager, so you're leading a group of people. What advice would you have for them as they begin their leadership journey?
Yeah. I mean, for me, so much of business and management comes down to the golden rule. Like, don't treat somebody how you wouldn't want to be treated, and be the boss you want to have. Because when people truly trust you with their career and their livelihood, I mean, people aren't just working for you, like their family is dependent on you too, right? And when people know you have their back and you're in the trenches with them when you need to be, and they truly want to work for you, they will give you their all. And you can lead by fear and intimidation, or you can lead because you're there with them, and it's a team and you're in it together, and it's about all of you. And I think when you're able to do that, you get something from people that's not just a working bond. It's, I have your back, right? I've managed people through some very challenging circumstances, and I hired someone who was going through a major life crisis in the middle of a crisis, knowing full well what he was getting ready to face, but because he was a really good person and he deserved that opportunity. And then we just got through, like we worked together to get him through what he needed to do personally. But because of that, he and I have a working relationship that I think is another level than what a lot of other people ever get to. And that being there for people when they need it, even if it means it's outside of working hours or different things, like if you truly want people to do their best, then you have to do your best for them as well.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. Amy, you're phenomenal. I love talking to you. Well, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
I just think Amy is so great. My friend Harry Campbell, who was episode number 1 on our podcast, he would say Amy's an attractor. Like she said in the podcast, I work hard to be the leader that people want to work for. So I thought that was phenomenal, as well as, she's so smart.
Oh yeah.
Mensa. I don't know who our other guest, but she might be our first Mensa guest. Reminds me, when she went to Darden, she felt she was maybe average amongst all the people because she went early on in her 20s. It reminded me of the story, to bring up Harry again. Harry has this 7-word exercise where you ask people, what are the 7 words to describe, Jeff Palacio or Joe Deshawn, and and it's easy to come up with the first 3 or 4, but the last 5, 6, 7 are harder. So I did the exercise to 56 people. Well, 56 people responded, and I told Harry, I said, "Yeah, smart was my number 1. Half of the 56 thought I was smart." He goes, "Yeah, and the other half thought you're an idiot." So it all puts it in perspective. But what was your takeaway, Joe?
Well, she was immediately a kindred spirit to me because when she mentioned that she was a COBOL programmer, and I have a definite special place in my heart for COBOL, having been a COBOL programmer for many years. I just think
that's why you and I get along. I was a COBOL programmer.
Because you were a COBOL programmer. COBOL is just such an elegant language, I think, and there's still a need for COBOL programmers out there. They're still out there.
Young viewers, please look it up on Wikipedia. COBOL, COBOL.
COBOL, Common Business Oriented Language. COBOL is literally older than R and Python and C. It was one of the originals, and it's still around, especially in financial and business and insurance industries. It's still out there, and I think it's a great language.
And who was the woman? She was Hopper.
Grace Hopper.
Grace Hopper. Yeah,
yep.
She was in the 40s, maybe.
And she invented COBOL, or set out some of the original syntax for COBOL. The whole idea of is that it's supposed to be an English-based language. That is, you write things as if you would be describing them. So going from remember pseudocode? Going from pseudocode directly into COBOL was just a matter of filling in the blanks.
Okay, we're going to start to lose half our audience.
Okay, well, let's go on. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was then you asked something about when she was a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, well, I always knew that I wanted to run a store because I wanted to run a cash register. And I can see that in myself, not necessarily a cash register, but I can see that kind of innocence, the innocence that a child thinks that owning a store is all about just running a cash register, that's actually what it is. And what could be more fun than pushing those buttons and running a cash register? I think that was kind of cool. And then what'd she do? She ends up getting a career in finance, and she's doing money stuff all along anyway.
Yeah, enterprise cash register.
She's literally running the cash register of the large corporations that she was working for. So I thought that was really interesting.
Joe, any leadership advice based on the episode you want to?
We are going to stick with the COBOL theme just one more time. When I'm going to go back to Wally, the famous COBOL programmer. One time he said, a wise person once told me that you can't boil an egg with a stick, but I can threaten you with a stick unless you boil an egg for me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.